Hello lands, lassies, and those of unspecified gender, it's the Irishman here, and today we're going to be talking about what would have happened if Goku had the OmniTrix. Now, there is going to be a couple ground rules we'll have to go over before getting into the story. Like, Goku will be a human here rather than a Saiyan. However, he can still scan Saiyans and then have the OmniTrix allow him to turn into a Saiyan for a short period of time. He will also have some of the basic aliens starting off, although most of the ones we'll see him turn into will be ones he scans throughout the series. There is favoritism on this channel, so Diamond Head will probably appear more than the others because clearly I'm still an 8-year-old boy. Diamond Head is just so goddamn cool. Now, despite being a human, he will still train and get stronger, much like Roshi, Yamcha, Tien, all of the human fighters in Dragon Ball. He isn't going to be like Ben, where without the OmniTrix, he's pretty much screwed. That's not the case here. Goku himself would always want to fight no matter what weapons he has at his disposal, and he would want to get stronger and better himself, so he does still train and get as strong as the other human fighters. He just doesn't have any Saiyan benefits. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get into the story of this what if. So, seeing as most of OG Dragon Ball would be pretty easy, we'll take the beginning parts of this video to go over Goku's backstory here. Rather than being an alien from outer space, he's just an abandoned child from a village somewhat close to Mount Paozu. When Grandpa Gohan finds him, he isn't worried about some alien race coming to take over the planet. Rather, he just sees a baby in a basket and decides to raise it himself, rather than letting it starve or get eaten by the wildlife. This all means that Goku has a pretty normal childhood, all things considered, seeing as he would never go Grade Ape and kill Grandpa Gohan since he doesn't have Grade Ape. And none of the aliens in the OmniTrix, when he actually finds it, would allow him to lash out and kill anybody, since he would still be in control of all of the powers he would gain from these aliens. Grandpa Gohan would teach him to use the OmniTrix and the powers he gets from it, not only for good, but also to make them his own. It might seem at first like Goku wants to reject this out of a sense of pride, but the more time passes, Grandpa Gohan would teach him that even though this power isn't his own, he can make it his own. Much like how a swordsman would use a sword as their own strength, rather than relying on their hands. The sword practically becomes a part of them, and the same would be true for Goku here, using the OmniTrix as sort of an extension of his own power. By the time that Bulma arrives on Mount Paozu to go on her adventure in search of the Dragon Balls, Goku would still be living with his grandfather, who would still be alive and still be training with him. In fact, I believe Bulma would arrive in the middle of a training session, where she would see a 4-armed giant red guy fighting against this old man. She would step in with her gun, shooting what looks to be a monster, although Goku would say no fair in a sort of gravelly voice, like 4-Arms has in the show. Grandpa Gohan would tell the little girl to stand down, as this is no monster nor a threat. It's merely a little boy using an extremely different power. So Bulma, a bit confused, would simply ask if they have any idea where the 4-star Dragon Ball is, and although they don't know exactly what it is, they would have something that fits that description, a 4-starred orb that seems to have some sort of mysterious background, but they mostly just use it as a paperweight. Grandpa Gohan would be more than willing to hand it over since he doesn't really have any use for it, and Goku, always eager to go out on some sort of an adventure, would ask Bulma if he can come along, seeing as this probably also wouldn't be the first time he's leaving Mount Paozu. He would have a normal childhood like I said earlier, and that includes communicating with the masses, going out and actually experiencing social environments. Really, right now, Goku sees this adventure for the Dragon Balls as just another fun escape from his everyday life, training and getting stronger to better himself, which is pretty much all it would be for him. So, with Bulma in tow, they would leave out on an adventure, where they would be able to get most of the Dragon Balls pretty easy. Roshi would have already met Goku and wouldn't be too remiss to lose the Dragon Ball since, much like Grandpa Gohan, he didn't really use it for anything. Roshi might know what the Dragon Balls are used for, but if he was willing to hand it over in the original, he's willing to do it now, and without Bulma having to, take advantage of herself, it's really weird, okay? The point is that Bulma isn't in any sort of inappropriate situation, and they still get the Dragon Ball, which is always good. They would encounter the Desert Bandit Yamcha, but honestly, Goku, after transforming into XLR8, would be able to run circles around him, and eventually land him on his butt faster than he could even process. Yamcha is surprised, but it doesn't really matter since there's nothing he can do. He is powerless in face of the mighty Son Goku and his space alien weapon. Either way, Yamcha would still kind of want to join the group like he did in the original, and eventually would after a couple more Dragon Balls are in their possession. Then, when encountering the monster Pilaf, they would be able to easily get out of the trap before being knocked out and the Dragon Balls having been stolen. So when Shenron is actually summoned, the Pilaf gang has no shot at getting the wish, and Oolong doesn't have to waste it with his, inappropriate ask, meaning that Bulma would be able to wish for the perfect boyfriend, but since she has Yamcha and Goku, two options right in front of her, she instead just decides to wish for a lifetime supply of strawberries, which could come in many forms, but I'll just say it's a strawberry that regrows every time she takes a bite out of it, kind of like the infinite pizza in Gravity Falls. One big difference here, now getting out of the Dragon Ball run sort of arc, would be that Goku wouldn't go and train with Master Roshi, since he's probably already done that. Rather, he would just go and train more with Grandpa Gohan, until eventually the Tenkaichi Budokai would come up, and he would enter like he had with the other few that he actually had the pleasure of participating in. Then, when he actually fights against Krillin, it's a lot more even, since Goku wouldn't be using the OmniTrix and he also isn't a Saiyan. So he's a bit surprised that there's somebody this strong here, but if it's one of Roshi's students, then it makes sense, and he's happy to see that there are other people that are actually able to challenge him, even though that wouldn't be as big of a problem here. Without being a Saiyan, even though he trains 24/7, he isn't actually the strongest person on Earth, and when fighting against Jackie Chun would actually lose pretty handedly. Since he's not using the OmniTrix, that's a weapon that wouldn't be allowed in the tournament, Goku actually loses here, but it's not as far of a distance between the two power-wise as you might think. Goku, although a lot weaker from not being a Saiyan, would still probably train more since he was actually being raised by Grandpa Gohan here. He's getting a lot more martial arts training a lot earlier, and even though he probably learned all he could when he was being raised in the original, having a couple more years with Grandpa Gohan would definitely do him a lot power-wise. So, without being a Saiyan, he's still somewhat close to where he was originally, even if he does still lose to Master Roshi or Jackie Chun, who is the winner of the tournament. I wonder if Grandpa Gohan would actually participate in the tournament, but either way, I still think Roshi wins here. Moving on to the Red Ribbon Saga, I actually see very little changing, seeing as Goku would still be sneak attacked by Mercenary Tao and still be nearly dead from the attack. And when it comes to actually taking down the Red Ribbon Army, he might not be as strong as his main series counterpart, but he isn't restricted from using the OmniTrix here. So he is actually vastly more powerful than that version of Goku from the main series, and would be able to take out the Red Ribbon in just as easy of a fashion, meaning that that arc goes pretty similarly, even though the ending portions would just be way easier. Although I guess his training with Korin would probably be a lot harder since he doesn't have that same drive and stamina from being a Saiyan. Either way, I still think he'd persevere and get stronger, even though he might not necessarily need the training from Korin. He does still do it, but he might not need it necessarily. When the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai rolls around, Goku has a much harder time than in the original, because even though he can't use his OmniTrix like the last one, he also doesn't see as much gains from training with Grandpa Gohan. That did happen, but it means much less and less as time goes on. His training with Corn is the only thing that means he actually beats out Krillin here. And when it comes to Tien, well, he has a much harder time, and even though there was an argument to be made that Goku should have won in the main series, here there isn't. Goku does still lose, and even though Tien doesn't fully see the benefits of being a good guy, he would still eventually come around and be a Z fighter through and through. Meaning that when we get to the King Piccolo section of this arc, Goku would have a lot of backup, even though he does not need it. But it's not because he's able to use the same aliens he has been in the last few arcs. Rather, it's because now he's able to use the OmniTrix and scan a new one, that being Namekian. Yes, he is able to transform into a Namekian after hunting down Tambourine, scanning him, and slapping down on his wrist, now transforming into the perfect version of a Namekian, which, surprisingly, well, not so surprisingly, but I said it sarcastically, would be able to beat the absolute piss out of not only Tambourine, not only Drum, Cymbal, and all of the other kids of Piccolo, but also King Piccolo himself, who would be vastly outclassed by this version of Goku, since not only is Goku somewhere comparable to his original self, but now also has the benefit of being able to transform into the most sophisticated, the most perfected version of a Namekian, which you could argue is able to use the orange form, but we're going to leave out those sorts of transformations for the time being. So Goku instead is just able to kick the crap out of Piccolo using his own race as an advantage. Although we will still say that King Piccolo spits out an egg just because I like Piccolo Jr. and don't want to see him be ridden out of the story that easily. And when Kami approaches Goku to have him train, not only to be able to get stronger in his own right, but also to be able to master the powers of a Namekian, since who's better to teach him than, well, a Namekian, Goku would take it up and begin training harder than ever. And this would actually be very difficult for him. The training that Kami presents is something that not even Roshi fully went through. In fact, I don't think Roshi ever actually began training with Kami, since it was just that extreme. He trained with Korin, but was never actually eligible to train with the Guardian of Earth, since it would just be that hard. Or maybe he wasn't worthy. Either way, Kami here would be training Goku harder than ever, and it actually is hard, rather than just being a little challenging in the original. Goku would get much stronger in comparison to where he was before, and probably reach the same level in base as his main series counterpart, even though, again, it is much more difficult for him here. But using the OmniTrix, he majorly outclasses his main series counterpart, like in pretty much the rest of this part. Meaning that Goku, when faced with Demon King Piccolo's reincarnation, would be able to hold him off until eventually the tournament arena is destroyed, and this version of Goku, now actually having been raised by Grandpa Gohan, understanding more than just wanting to fight a lot, would get that the tournament fight is pretty much over now. And since the arena's been completely destroyed, they're both probably already out of bounds. So Goku allows himself to use the OmniTrix and transforms not into a Namekian, that'd be overkill, but rather into Diamond Head, now spiking down most of Piccolo's limbs, his arms, his legs, and eventually his torso, meaning that he can no longer move, and can either be sealed away by Kami, or has the choice to reform, which, it's obvious which Piccolo would choose. He's a little reluctant, but he surrenders the fight and then decides to begin his transition into a truly good person, by getting a Senzu Bean from Goku, and instead of immediately lashing out with a giant attack, just decides to fly away to fight another day, except next time, maybe not to the death, since admittedly Piccolo did have a lot of fun in this encounter, even if he was trying to kill his opponent. And now, with the tournament over, and the entirety of OG Dragon Ball being completed, Goku would settle down with Chi-Chi. Yes, get your booze out of the way now, but I have no way to write her out of the story. So Goku does still settle down with the Chinese baddie that we all know from the original story. Then, after 5 years pass, they have a kid. Raditz would arrive on Earth in search of Kakarot. However, There is no Kakarot here. Rather, he finds someone who looks eerily similar to his father for some reason, but we're just going to ignore that. Rather, Raditz decides to fight this guy since he does seem to have a pretty high-tech weapon on his arm, that being the OmniTrix. Raditz would have heard stories of it, but never actually seen it in person, since obviously it was a legend. Not something he ever thought he would see firsthand, but it is pretty cool, and could definitely help them be able to take down Frieza. So Raditz is determined to get it for himself. The two duke it out, and even though Goku does have an extremely hard time in his base form, after using Flame Blast, Diamond Head, Accelerate, Cannon Bolt, all interchangeably, and eventually excluding the Namekians because, well, he just doesn't want to end the fight that easy, he decides to actually use something that he hasn't done in a couple years, scanning a new alien. Yes, Goku would now be able to transform into a Saiyan, and after slapping down on his watch, he would transform into the mighty Saiyan Warrior. But not just any Saiyan Warrior, no. Now after transforming, he would turn into a Super Saiyan. With the golden spiked up hair, this would be the prime sort of physique of an actual Saiyan warrior. This would be the strongest sort of Saiyan possible, the Super Saiyan. Well, strongest without outside help. That would obviously be a Super Saiyan God, but we're not getting there yet. Raditz is shocked, surprised, and absolutely dumbfounded that this was even possible. This weapon that Goku possesses, this device, was capable of allowing a mere human to transform into the legendary Super Saiyan. His power is insane, probably even trumping Vegeta's in Great Ape. It's incredible. So he beeps in on his scouter, telling Vegeta and Nappa what he's seeing, as Goku, although a little wary of backup on the way, isn't scared by any means, and just decides to ask Raditz if that's his way of surrendering, asking for help from some unknown adversaries. But Raditz says that he doesn't even want to fight anymore. As much as he would love to have that weapon at his disposal, he realizes that Goku not only probably knows how to use it better than anybody else, but is also far too strong for him to actually take on at this point. So instead, he decides to go about it in a nicer way of recruiting Goku to join their cause, saying that there's this evil tyrant out in space who slaughters men, women, and children indiscriminately just because they get in his way, and sometimes for fun, destroying entire planets, extincting different races just because he wants to further his own goals, and this actually gets under Goku's skin a lot more than you would expect. Right here, right now, his main motivation isn't fighting. He was raised by Grandpa Gohan mostly to be a properly good person. Even though he did get a lot of extra training in, this builds Goku's character a lot more than what we saw in the original story, meaning he's a lot more righteous and a bit more of a Superman type than you would expect from the main series counterparts. This means that when Goku sees somebody in need, his immediate reaction would want to be to help them. So Goku would offer Raditz a space in his own home, that way he can train and get stronger, and eventually when his friends get here, they can all take on this monster together, and well, this is probably the best outcome for Raditz, especially since I just don't really like killing him in these stories. I prefer to keep him alive because he's just a really interesting character, and his overall design is just epic. So, as 1 year passes, Goku would intend to improve his overall base power, whereas Raditz wants to learn how to achieve Super Saiyan for himself. He's not entirely sure if it's possible, but he hopes it is, since it would mean not only would they have one Super Saiyan on their side, but now two, which is definitely better than just one. So he would begin training to get that, whereas Goku just wants to get as strong as Raditz base to base. Even though his base form isn't his main priority, Goku does still want to improve it. He is a martial artist after all. Much like Tien, he would want to increase his overall physique and base power just for the goal of self-improvement, something that Roshi would have taught him. He's never supposed to quit when it comes to bettering himself. After this time is over though, Nappa and Vegeta would arrive on the planet, determined to meet the Super Saiyan as well as come up with a plan to defeat the monstrous Frieza. And that, my dear viewers, is where we're going to be ending the video for today. I hope you enjoyed watching, as I certainly enjoyed making it, and if you could, please like the video, subscribe to the page, and hit the notification bell. That would be very much appreciated. That last part doesn't really do anything for me, but does help you guys out, and you have to subscribe to get there. So why don't you do both of us solid and hit those two buttons. And with all that out of the way, I'll talk to you later. This is, always has been, and always will be the Irishman. Later. Bye.